Welcome back to UWP on Xbox One. Darren, what are we talking about in this section?
In this section, we're going to be talking about page layout and some design considerations you need to put in play when you're putting an application onto the Xbox.
Because building for a television is just different.
It is just different.
Well, we have some guidelines that really help developers kind of think this through. Let's walk through what we mean when we really say simple, and really simple is the key thing when you're building for a television.
Exactly. As we mentioned, it's a unique medium to design for because it's 10 feet away.
Yes.
It's a large display, but in reality, there's low fidelity of information on there.
Yeah, that's
that,
right.
You're going to be displaying your items bigger. We've talked in previous sessions about how your UI by default is scaled up 200%.
Mm-hmm.
You have the TV safe area border around it, which reduces the amount of real estate you have to display content.
Right.
And so, you really want to keep that design very, very simple. You don't want to overwhelm the user. You don't want to make it so it's hard for them to process the information that's on there. Cluttering it up with hundreds of controls.
Really technical controls can be hard to work with.
Yeah,
as well.
because again, we have this much simpler controller that we're moving around.
So when developers are trying to decide, how much is too much information, what's the right amount, what's your rule of thumb?
So the rule of thumb is you really want to imagine that it's a mobile device. You have these high resolution phones, but they're all at a large scale factor. You're not showing things at the same resolution as you would on your desktop or the same scale on your desktop.
Great point.
Because you wouldn't be able to read it.
So you can still make them as beautiful as you want, but as you're interacting with it, you have to think like a phone. Not too much clutter on the phone. We've kind of trained ourselves for mobile development. Just take that forward to television.
Exactly. If we fall back onto the Windows 10 design, everything's using effective pixels. And the idea is that, a 1-inch square on your phone should still appear to be a 1-inch square on your desktop.
Right.
Should appear to be a 1-inch square on your TV. And so obviously there's a scaling that's going on to ensure that occurs.
Makes sense to me. I think it's easy to say simple. Maybe it's better to show simple.
Sure. So let's have a look at this slide viewer application on the Xbox. So as we can see here, this is a very, very simple UI. The idea is it's a basic slideshow. And so we've got our imagery is full bleed. It's moved out through the TV safe area. So for those displays that can show everything, we don't have a border. But for those displays that do trim, we're not losing essential information here. Then what we also have is we have a list view that allows us to navigate through our slides. And so we can navigate through and clicking up and down. But once again, we've got our list view is observing the principle of ensuring that the selected item is staying in our main view. We're also seeing that we have hinting that shows content above the selected item and content below. It's in the TV safe area, but it's not essential. So we know that we can navigate through and we can see our content and we can traverse through. We get to the bottom of the list. We see that the bottom of the list is presented within the TV safe area. Yeah. So it's a very interesting set of displays, and there I am on top of a mountain.
Yeah, we live in a beautiful state.
We do.
No doubt about it.
And we have that high visibility focus selector, which really makes it clear exactly what's being focused.
Now, when we have a lot of space, when we're showing, we have a lot of area there and we don't want to clutter it, what are we doing?
Because we're moving to this more of a chromeless design metaphor, the idea is that space allows you to separate content as opposed to drawing borders and everything along those lines.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that there's plenty of space in your design and your implementation of the design so that the brain can easily pass out the various chunks of content that's been rendered up and understand them.
So it's not all about how much space can I provide, it's also about how easy is this, but also how readable, because this is pretty far away and there's a lot of value in just legibility.
Exactly.
What are just some of the guides you would say to a developer if you want to make your application legible? Start here.
So one of the key things is to make sure that you're using nicely scaled fonts. You want to be 24px and above. If you go below 20px, it becomes very, very difficult for people to read on that screen. Although you may have a wonderful 65-inch TV, they're typically going to be further away.
Sure.
So, again, you're making sure that everybody can read and experience your application the way you intend in that environment. So it's not a case of just taking your desktop app and moving it across.
Gotcha. So there are some optimizations that developers think through as well.
Exactly, and one of the key things to think about there is, we're using a controller which has a very linear focus mechanism. We move right, we're going to move right. We move left, we're going to move left, and so on.
Right, like a mouse on a desktop, I can skip over items and just click the other thing.
And so, the ease of navigation has to be a key thing to think about. The kind of rule of thumb is you want to make sure you have less than 6 clicks to be able to move around your screen into all of the elements you want to interact with. And that's where some of the other tricks we've talked about focus engagement and all those kind of things come into play. So if we look at this particular UI here, we have a play button, and if we have our scrolling text as a focusable element, in order to be able to move to a new element to preview it, we have to go click, click to get down there.
Yeah.
The more optimal experience is to start with play, because that's probably the most likely thing you're doing when you're going to be looking at this particular screen, and then to be easily able to transition to another element to navigate.
Sure. Okay, so one of it may just be some rearrangement that may not even impact your desktop application. You may rearrange for the sake of Xbox, but leave it for everybody.
Exactly, because it just makes more sense, perhaps.
Sure. That's not the only challenge we hit, and I think this slide really shows us a more sophisticated UI, which is nice because I think it's good to show sophisticated as well.
Exactly.
And this has a lot of challenges to it that we could speak to, but I think it's better if we just show them.
Sounds like a good plan. So let's go over to the Xbox and we'll launch the UI challenge.
Aha.
So what we have here is obviously an application that is pretending to be a real estate application. It's unfortunate that right now in our environment, the map isn't displaying. We get a blue square, but that is actually a map control. But we can traverse around here. So we have our choose a city. And if I move to the right here, it moves to any price, home type. Now, if I move down into my list, these are representing my results. Now I'm in my list view.
Okay.
So now how am I going to get to previous and next? Well, if I start moving down, we can see I actually have 50 items in this list view, so I have to scroll all the way through.
Earlier we were saying you want to minimize the number of clicks, maybe even to 6 as your maximum. 51 is higher.
It seems a little bit over, so it seems suboptimal, I agree. So we get to the bottom of the list, and now we can move out until we got previous and next.
Now go back to any price, and you've got to repeat that whole nightmare.
Exactly. And, there's ways, your users could work out how to shortcut it. If I move left to the map, move up, move right, that goes around. But again, this is power user kind of thing.
That's right.
You want to make it intuitive for your users. Now we've got another problem in actual fact is I'm hitting down because I want to get to the bottom block of text to scroll it.
Yeah, it's clipped a little. I want to scroll down and see the rest of that text.
But I can't get any focus on there, so I can't scroll it.
Because you've got a regular text block.
I've got a text block inside a scroll viewer.
Inside a scroll viewer, neither of which can receive focus.
Exactly. And so we're kind of in trouble here. So what do we need to do to change our application? Well,
let's try this. What if we just took the previous and the next and we move them above the list? Would that solve the problem?
So that would help us in the scenario of moving down from any price to get to previous and next. However, we'd still have the problem where we've got to transition all the way through our list here to get down to our scrolling text.
Oh, yeah.
So it simplifies some of the scenario of moving through the pages of results, but it doesn't actually help us in our overall navigation clarity.
Okay, what would you recommend?
So instead, I think we need to do a couple of different things, and let's actually go into the code and see how we're doing. We can talk through that as we look. So I'm going to bring up my UI challenge application, and I'm going to look at my XAML layout. So what we have here is a pretty standard kind of grid-based layout. Here's our title. So this is showing our real estate up the top left-hand side of the application. Here's our auto-suggest, and we can see there's no magic in any of this navigation.
Just standard controls.
We have a stack panel here, which is horizontally laying out our any price and home type buttons. Okay. So again, those of you who've seen the previous session of talking about XY focus right and left, we're not having to override any of these things because we've laid everything out in a logical way so it understands exactly what's going on. We've got our map control, and we'll come back to that one in a moment. But now we're going to look at our list. So this is our list of results that showed up on the right-hand side here. This is our default list. And we had the problem where as soon as we got focused on the list, we actually focused into the elements inside, and we had to scroll through everything. But what we can actually do is we can add this attribute to our list, and this sets is focus engagement enabled true.
So this attribute is new in the anniversary update of Windows.
Correct.
And you're setting it for the sake of Xbox, but it'll work on desktop as well, meaning it won't break anything.
Sure. It's actually just going to be ignored on desktop. And what this will do is, instead of placing focus inside the list view itself will gain focus. And I will have to hit the A button to actually engage focus on the list view, and that will then start focusing on the interior. Nice. And I would hit B to leave that focus to move out. So what this will do, and we'll demonstrate it in a little while.
That's all you have to do.
That's all you have to do. Pretty simple and straightforward.
Yeah.
So we can move straight over that. Now we have, if you recall, we had the challenge where we couldn't scroll our text at the bottom.
That's right.
So if we come down, what we have here, here's our scroll viewer.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, I'm actually using a relative panel to lay out the preview image and the scroll viewer. Again, focus understands all of these things, but because scroll viewer isn't focusable,
that's right,
we have to do something special. So again, I can add my is engagement enabled true to my scroll viewer. And so now my scroll viewer will capture focus.
Fascinating.
And so if I hit A at this point, it will then allow me to scroll the content.
This is great.
So a final thing that we wanted to address was the map, which unfortunately wasn't showing correctly in our demo.
Yeah.
But we can still show how we can switch the mouse mode on. Now in our preview environment, we actually have a little challenge here, which is we cannot specify the attribute for the mouse pointer on the map control itself, because there's a mismatch between my SDK version and the version of the operating system that's on Xbox.
So you can't declare it in the XAML.
But we can do this in the code behind. Now, if we were doing this safely, we'd actually check for the code contract and all those kind of things.
Sure.
But what we're doing right now is we're actually going to turn around and say that the map control requires a pointer when it's engaged. And so we'll see how that works as well to allow us to move around inside the map. So let's deploy this and see what changes have occurred in the app itself.
All right.
Okay, so here we are back in our application. So if you remember, moving to the right applied focus onto these buttons. If I move down, previously we would be focused inside the list view.
Yeah, I went right to an item last time.
But now we're actually focused on the list view. So if I hit down again, I skip straight down to previous and next. So a much better experience. If I come back up to my list view and I hit the A button, now I'm focused within the list view and I can scroll around and select different items. If I hit B, I disengage from the list view item back to the list, and again I can move around.
That's nice.
We also remembered that hitting down from previous or next, I couldn't apply focus to my scrolling text block below.
Oh, that's right.
This time, now that I have engagement mode enabled, I can actually get focus onto my list view. If I hit the A button to engage it, now my left joystick will actually scroll that content.
Nice.
If I hit B, I disengage from scrolling and I'm back in navigation mode. The final change we made was to our map control, which if I engage, now turns into mouse mode.
Nice.
So I can actually pan around by holding the A button and moving things around and interact in a much richer way than just regular panning with the control. If I hit B, I disengage and I'm back in focus mode.
Nice. This engagement way of thinking is really nice, and how easy it is to implement as well. That one attribute and you're ready to go.
Exactly.
So there's a lot to think about when you're trying to build a great mobile application, but there's not so much you need to think about when you're building an Xbox, right? All you need to focus on is my application simple enough to be a great experience at 10 foot?
Yep.
And that includes things like legibility of text, simplifying your controls so there's not so much on the screen. But then we have this new idea of engagement that really solves a lot of the usability problems that a normal application might run into. Solved pretty simple.
It is.
All right, we'll see you again.